Okay, so cards on the table. Um, I am a dog lover. My parents had a black lab for 12 years. His name was Hunter. He was awesome. I'm pretty convinced that he was the best dog who ever lived. And I know that you think that your dog might be the best dog who ever lived. And I don't want to take that away from you, but I just want to say that Hunter was probably better because he was the best dog that ever lived. But, all joking aside, I do love dogs. I'm not a big cat fan, so I just want to put that out on the table because when I saw a story that came out late last year, back in 2015, I thought it was fascinating because the idea behind the study was what your cat would do if your cat was bigger, right? So the idea was okay, so if your cat was bigger than like the 8 pounds of fluff that your cat is, what would your cat do? So these psychologists and these neurologists, they study cat behavior and they study the way that cats display emotions and some of the things that cats do. And they came to the conclusion. I want to read this to you. This is out of the USA Today. I believe it was November 1st, 2015. I want to read it to you. It says this. If you ever thought your cat was anxious, insecure, tense, suspicious, or aggressive towards you, you aren't making it up, one of the researchers said. If they were bigger, they would probably consider killing you. Right? Like, I read that and all of a sudden it confirmed all of my suspicions about cats. If your cat was bigger, your cat would probably consider killing you. Right? Okay, so I tell that story and I read that article because I think the article is helpful in us understanding the nature and character of sin. Peter, one of Jesus's disciples, the Apostle Peter, he writes this in 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8. He says, "Be sober-minded, be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion seeking someone to devour." So when I think about cats, and I think about the fact that if cats were bigger, if cats could grow beyond the 8 pounds that they are, they would consider eating you. When I think about that, I think about the way that we treat sin, because oftentimes we treat sin, the things that God tells us not to do that we like to do, or the things that God tells us to do that we don't do, we treat those things as if they're kind of like pets. We'll let them into the house. We'll let them in. They're small. They're not a big deal. We let them into our hearts. They don't really do much of anything because they're kind of over in the corner. It's just a little thing that we do that we've let into our lives. But then as we feed the sin, as we give in to the sin, as the sin grows, it's seeking to devour us. See, the thing that's true about sin, and maybe you've never heard anybody actually admit this who is coming from a Christian perspective, is sin is fun. Like, it's fun to be rebellious. It's fun to push back from what the Lord tells you should do for a season. But ultimately, what you'll realize is that if you follow the Lord for long enough, and if that sin dwells in your heart long enough, what will eventually happen is you will begin to see it devour you. You will begin to see it eat away at your soul and eat away at your joy and eat away at the vibrancy in your relationships with others and your relationship with Jesus. See, if you're watching this and you're not a Christian, you've got to understand the reasons that Christians don't want to sin. We don't want to do the things that God tells us not to do, and we do want to do the things that God tells us to do, is not because we're trying to please God. It's because we have a Heavenly Father who loves us through Jesus, and ultimately we know He's after our good and He's after our joy, and the things He tells us not to do, He's telling us not to do those things because He wants to see us live a life full of joy, full of fullness and life, and He knows that those sins will eventually grow to the point that they look to devour us. And so my hope is this Thursday, if you're watching this and you're a Christian especially, is that you would maybe do a little bit of self-examination, and you would look and say, okay, what are some things in my life, not your neighbor's life, like this isn't like the thing that you forward to your neighbor and say, what's the sin in your life? I know that you're struggling with. No. Look in the mirror and go, okay, what are the little things in my life that I've let into my heart, the sins, like cats, little cats we've let into our homes? What are the things that I've let into my life that are small? but I'm feeding them, and they're growing. And they have these kind of cat-like characteristics where you see them insecure and suspicious and aggressive, and eventually they're looking to devour you as you let them grow. What are those things? And my hope and my prayer is that you would begin to confess those things, run from those things, get those things out of your life, because we serve a God who wants to see us have life and have it to the full, as Jesus says in John chapter 10, verse 10. So I hope this was helpful to everyone who might find themselves watching it, and I hope that you have a great Thursday afternoon.